But we start this week, Martin, with a look at Jeffrey Epstein last Friday evening and Saturday morning. He was found dead, wasn't he?
I was expecting that he would die, to be honest with you. My friend Will...
Well, it's easy enough to say that, but there's a chap called Richie Allen. Now, Richie Allen does a regular programme. He's off now for a couple of weeks, amazingly. Just like literally the day that Jeffrey Epstein dies, Richie is off on his holidays. But 2 weeks before he died, that's about 3 weeks ago, Jeffrey Epstein was commented on by Jason Bermas, who's a fabled... He's done a documentary in the US called Fabled Enemies. He's one of their top 9/11 truth researchers in the United States, young guy. And he was chatting to Richie Allen on Richie Allen's show 3 weeks ago. So let's have a listen to what they said 2 weeks before Epstein allegedly hanged himself.
It seems to me, Jason, that Jeffrey Epstein had intimate relationships with every calibre of politician, whether they were on the right or on the left. Let's be honest about it. And why don't Trump supporters just say, OK, he has had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He did know him very well. He did spend time with him. He was on the plane. He was in his apartment in Manhattan. Why are they so stubborn about it? Why don't they just accept it?
You know what? It's tough for me to understand, too. I don't understand it. When I got into this game, it was never about right and left.
No.
We didn't pick sides. I wasn't part of a team baseball. And the cognitive dissonance is over the top. For instance, the allegation that he broke it off at Mar-a-Lago, right?
Yeah.
Well, that actually comes from one of the victims. And in the same breath, that victim says that, yes, Trump was on the plane, on Epstein's plane, by the way, with her and Ghislaine Maxwell at the time, and Melania. Now, aside from that, we have the Vanity Fair report where, and this came out long before any of the scandal, where Trump is quoted as saying, you broke the cardinal rule, Jeffrey. You were late for someone else's plane. And him and Ghislaine got on there with he and Melania. Now, there's a report out there. I believe the guy's name is Jeffrey Horander. I might be butchering his last name. But essentially, this guy is a Florida businessman that says that he set up a party at Mar-a-Lago with Epstein and Trump and 28 women of age, which is fine. I have no problem with that.
No.
The problem is in the press, though, Richie, is that he's claiming this is the first time that Trump met Melania, which would make sense, kind of an audition tape for Wife 3. If you can't understand that you elected a guy who was 3 times married, always cheated on his wife, always bragged about his sexual prowess, ran beauty pageants. If you didn't know he was a misogynist, I don't know how blind you were. He was leaps and bounds better than Hillary Clinton. But then on the flip side, you have the liberals that won't talk about the Clinton relationship and how his lawyers, aside from Clinton being on the plane all the time, 26 times at least, even though some of those trips may have been several times on his plane, fine, we'll go there. His lawyers are claiming that the Clinton initiative was started by Epstein, which would also make sense. So this guy was heavily embedded with a lot of these people. I do believe Trump broke off the relationship, as people said, but to not acknowledge there was a previous one only does yourself harm, and it only makes you look stupid in the long run.
I'm going to, do you know what I think? I think he's going to walk, or something might happen to him. I never make those types of, I never speculate like that. I'm not one of those. I don't believe in being sensational, like yourself, Jason. But I think because you're looking at the royal family, you're looking at the Clintons, you're looking at Trump, you're looking at so many more people. Like you said, you made a brilliant point there. We don't have all the logs. He can't be allowed to talk, and I think he'll either walk and he'll go somewhere and we'll never see him again, or he'll have a fit of he'll have a fit of guilty conscience or something, and he'll hang himself or he'll slit his wrist. That's what I think.
So that was Richie Allen saying that on an interview with Jason Bermas, actually saying, Martin, he'll hang himself. Well, as you were having a private conversation saying it, there's Richie Allen on the Richie Allen show 2 weeks before Epstein is found hanged, saying, well, he'll hang himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about left-wing and right-wing politicians being drawn into his net, the suspicion is that Ghislaine Maxwell was a Mossad agent and has always been a Mossad agent. Her father, Robert Maxwell, certainly was. And that
hang on, what are you basing that on?
Well, there's plenty of stuff out there, Tony. I haven't got anything to hand, but there's plenty of information about Maxwell. Came from Czechoslovakia originally. He's of Jewish extraction, very pro-Israeli, and he was. Lots of people think that he was got rid of by Mossad.
Okay, so this isn't just us. Let's just remind everybody, because also the United States Attorney General William Barr says there are serious irregularities at the jail where Jeffrey Epstein kills himself.
Yeah, well, we're obviously more information is coming out about what happened here, whether he killed himself, whether somebody killed him, or maybe another possibility, he's just been spirited away somewhere and he's not actually dead. We don't know. But
so whose body was it that was taken out?
I don't know. That's all detail that needs to be looked at. But the links between Epstein and Israeli intelligence are actually well documented. And people are missing the whole point about this. If you are Mossad, you want to be able to blackmail all the politicians in all the parties so that you can get what you want out of them.
There's Philip Giraldi's actually done a whole article about what he believes are the links between Epstein and the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service.
Philip Giraldi is an ex-CIA agent. He's the sort of person who would know about these things. That's the word
we'll put
on
a
the
link
street.
up. Put a link up.
That's
on our
the word
show
on the
page,
street.
yeah.
Now, people are asking, why would Ghislaine Maxwell go around, finding all these young girls to prostitute to these rich guys? What's in it for her? And of course, this goes back to the 1930s and the use of blackmail by the mafia, Meyer Lansky and people like that, and of course their links with the intelligence services, not just Mossad but the CIA and the FBI. And basically, this has been going on for years. It's a standard technique. This is what the whole to my mind, what this whole VIP paedophile thing is all about. It's a technique which is used to blackmail people in power. You get them to go to a party, they do something they shouldn't be doing, you photograph it, and at that point they will do what you want them to do. We're invading Iraq, yes we are, because that's what you're going to do. That's how it works, and that's what we're just lifting the corner of the curtain here. But that's the reality of what this is all about.
Now, okay, what about Ghislaine Maxwell, however you pronounce it? Her connection seems to have been very strong to him. She's gone into hiding, I believe.
Well, I understand that she's been located at some upscale residence in New York State with her current boyfriend, who's a hedge fund person. Now, I know that it's very hard, are we being anti-Semitic when we talk about Mossad's operations? I think that's absolutely absurd. Mossad is a very, very serious organisation with a huge budget and a massive agenda, and they've been working for many, many years to steer Western politics in the direction they want it to go in, which is why, of course, Trump has recognised Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, even though nobody else agrees with him. It's because they've got stuff on him. That's what it comes down to, and the stuff they've got on him is the stuff that Epstein might have talked about. And of course, it's very much more convenient for everybody if Epstein ain't around to talk about it anymore.
There's also some pretty strong connections, aren't there, to Prince Andrew? So we're talking about both sides of the Atlantic here. The Clinton Foundation was talked about there.
Yeah,
the possibility that Epstein was the person that introduced Melania to Donald Trump as well.
Yeah.
But what about the royal connections here in the UK? What's Prince Andrew's background, and why might this be so sensitive?
Well, the royal family are involved in these elite circuits one way or another. Prince Andrew, for example, basically his job, if you can call it that, is going around the world selling British armaments. That's what he does. He goes to conferences and says, why don't you buy our stuff? So he's definitely a target for this sort of thing. And of course, the sort of tabloid media pick up on the royal family connection to all of this. And isn't this terrible? But the point is that Epstein was a very sophisticated operator, operating for many years, probably working for intelligence agencies to blackmail senior people, which is why he went out of his way to get everybody on these planes and get them all compromised. It's called dirtying up. That's what the mafia call it. They call it dirtying. You've got to dirty them up. And that's what they've done. They've dirtied them all up.
Johnny Vedmore, who runs a website called theswamp.media, he has pointed out also that one of the senior people running the National Health Service's tech side, that is to say deciding on policy for the National Health Service's computer systems, is somebody called Nicole Junkermann. Now, she had very strong links to Jeffrey Epstein and rode on his so-called Lolita Express private jet on several occasions. But interestingly, she seemed to be involved with Epstein in a way completely different to these underage girls and the what seems to be the sexual side of this. So it was just Epstein and her on the plane going around to various destinations in the world. So it seems like he had a sort of double life. So on one side, he was doing trafficking of minors for sexual purposes, but he was doing other things too, including with this Nicole Junkermann, who now actually decides on computer systems in the National Health Service.
Well, I would suggest to you that if you were running Mossad, what you'd want to do is you want to get everybody involved. The intelligence agencies will tell you money, ideology, coercion, ego, mice, squeak. And that's how you get people to do what
why
you
would
want.
the intelligence services be interested in the technical stuff in the National Health Service?
Well, if you think about
if
you think about mass surveillance, you can mass survey the population because everybody's
data mining.
Everybody's data's on there. Yeah.
Data mining, incredible and very, very worrying. It does make you wonder whether actually some of these tech systems are leaving us completely open to fraud, as we started in the first hour.
Well, I would argue that the tech systems have been developed by the intelligence agencies initially as a means of observation of the population. We all know that, but eventually the internet, apart from silly fantasy stuff about being invented by Tim Berners-Lee, is basically invented by the US military as an internal thing. And then, of course, they've then run it out as a means. Once they've got everybody on the internet, they can watch. They can pick up all the info they want on people. I mean, frankly, anybody who uses any electronic equipment must realise that you can be monitored, and that's the whole point of it.
I mean, it does seem possibly likely that if Epstein had a role in bringing Melania and Donald Trump together, that something might come out about exactly what Melania's role was and whether or not she was, say, for example, a high-class prostitute.
Well, but leaving that aside, the point is that it's quite clear that an organisation like Mossad would probably, in private, boast about their technical skill at blackmailing people. They would, I'm sure. And therefore, I don't think it's anti-Semitic for us to point the finger at them and say, well, hang on a minute, we think you're behind all of this. And of course, we've got loads of evidence that they were behind things like, the dancing Israelis on 9/11, who turned out to be Mossad agents, who clearly had advanced knowledge of the attack. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't go to his meeting that morning as Israeli finance minister on 7/7 because the Israelis said that they had a warning that there was going to be an attack. Mossad is a very dangerous, vicious organisation, and
maybe they're just good.
Well, that's what they'd say if that book that came out, Rise Up and Kill First, in which they boast about all the assassinations they've carried out, all completely illegal. I mean, if you murder people in foreign jurisdictions, you should go to prison.
Well, let's go
rather than boasting about it. But they boast about it.
Jeffrey Epstein and his links to the Clinton Initiative and the Clinton Foundation are pretty clear. So there were some very powerful people in US politics who could potentially have been very embarrassed by what he had to say. What do you think a court case, if he'd still been alive, would have looked like? Who might have been undermined by that?
Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because what's happened now is it's making it much more difficult to say what exactly happened and who. Because
he already was prosecuted and then he got off.
Yes,
he was just given a pardon.
And then loads of people he got off, and then loads of people, famous people, then said, "Oh well, he's got off," and therefore they resumed relationships with him. I've heard a rumour that he was supposedly a hedge fund manager in Wall Street, and he had a very swanky pad and all the rest of it. But people in Wall Street said we hardly ever saw him. He didn't do anything in Wall Street much, but he always had loads of money. And I think if you look into this, you will see what's underlying all of this. Whitney Webb on Mint Press has done a very good two historical articles about the use by the CIA, the FBI, and the mafia, particularly Meyer Lansky, the Jewish mafia. They've been using this kind of technique to blackmail senior people for years, going back to the 1930s.
Okay, so we'll put a link up on our show page to Whitney Webb's articles on, was it Mint Press News?
Mint Press News, yeah. But they're two historical articles about the use by the mafia and the intelligence agencies of honey traps and blackmail. And it's a standard technique.
I'll put the link up to that on our show page, as well as the Philip Giraldi article at thisweek.org.uk. And I don't imagine, I mean, although, of course, now he's dead, Epstein has kind of dropped off the main news stories. Certainly on this programme, we'll be pursuing an investigation, a continuing investigation into all the allegations presented. I think maybe we should finish, though, on Prince Andrew again, Martin, but literally the day before Epstein supposedly committed suicide, Prince Andrew was named again in court papers and by witnesses to be used in the Epstein trial.
Well, I think you'll find that Prince Andrew has got some very shady contacts. He's basically an arms salesman, and he goes around the world selling arms. That's what he does.
So was Epstein simply too big to jail?
Well, I think what's happened is, if you do this sort of stuff, eventually something leaks out, and then the whole thing can unravel. But of course, the answer to that, if you are a big, powerful organisation, is anybody is basically expendable. If Epstein, I mean, if you get involved in this kind of world, you've got to realise that if things go wrong, you're expendable.
And is he alive still, do you think? Is it feasible that maybe some sort of body was put in his place?
Something's gone very odd here. The Washington Post have commented upon the post-mortem, saying that the breaking of the hyoid bone is more likely to do with strangling rather than hanging. And also, we've got evidence that he was screaming in his cell last week, and somebody was attacking him. And of course, this is a high security prison, and the guards, when he was committing suicide, supposedly were asleep. Both asleep. Extraordinary, eh?
Yeah, so I think he was too big to jail, and also certainly too big to come out in a court case, rather like, so for example, the Paul Burrell case here in Britain to do with the royal family that was suddenly dropped at the last minute.
Well, it's not just to do with the royal family, it's more like Robert Maxwell, who's got lots of evidence that he was a Mossad agent, but he was probably killed by his own side because he knew too much and he was going to say too much.
Okay, so let's look at the US-China trade war now. Surely counterproductive, this trade war, and the potential to lead to a real fighting war between these two great nuclear-armed superpowers. We asked this week, with the help of US podcast Guns and Butter, a little extract from that, how did the US come to dominate the global economy, and how are China and Russia now undermining the prime position of the dollar? Well, we're going to hear some complicated arguments now, but if the truth were easily understood by children, of course, it would be on the BBC.
1920 through 1960. How was the U.S. able to dominate the world economy
speaking to Michael
from its
Hudson.
position as a creditor?
Well, other countries were broke.